Fnatic have been and are one of the most prestigious and illustrious gaming orgs in the world. They stand right on top with some of the biggest names in esports and have created a legacy in almost every esport they've touched. CSGO, League of Legends, and now they've even cemented themselves in the Hall of Fame of Valorant. Back when Valorant was announced, a lot of big teams and players jumped at the opportunity of finding something brand new to be their next big thing. Everyone knew that Valorant had the potential to be one of the top esports out there, and hence the hype followed it massively. A lot of top tier orgs started forming their teams, and one of them would also be Fnatic. In February 2021, Fnatic made their debut with their first roster in Valorant, led by Boaster and Mini, which also featured Doma, Mystic, Mo40, and Tsac. It wasn't the most elegant of starts for the roster as they were heading into unexplored waters. The team took some time actually to find their footing as they were struggling initially to find the results they wanted. They were constantly finishing out of the top 4 in the first few EMEA Challenger qualifiers and just couldn't make it to Masters. Until VCT EU Stage 2 Challengers 2, where they dominated their way through after a couple of roster changes, with Mo and Tsac paving way for the monster we know to be Durka. Since his arrival, this man has absolutely changed the face of Fnatic's attack and firepower, becoming one of the best players in the world in the process. Alongside him, Magnum 2 joined the roster, who provided great support and played a very important role in the team, where Boaster and Mini were really looking for a support player to be a solid backbone of Fnatic at the time. They won Challengers 2 against Team Liquid in the final, who were at the time considered to be a force of nature in the EU scene. Fnatic looked like the contenders to beat in the Challengers finals, but Liquid edged them out to win the EU region in a very close 3-2 scored best of 5 match. Fnatic definitely were disappointed, but not much, because their making to the finals was more than enough for them to qualify for Masters at Reykjavik. And this is where Fnatic's true story begins. Fnatic were definitely one of the favorites going into this tournament alongside the likes of Sentinels and Team Liquid, but the world saw Sentinels above everyone at that point because of their potential and the fact that they had tens. Fnatic did have a good start, beating Crew comfortably, but that comfort got taken away in the second round itself by Sentinels, who sent them to the lower brackets. Sentinels were looking strong, far too beyond anybody's reach and anyone, as they cleared out the upper bracket without dropping a single map and reached the grand final. Whereas Fnatic, on the other hand, had to punch their way through every damn team as if it's their last match, and they actually did it. X10, version 1, NU, and their EU rivals Team Liquid as well. They destroyed everyone in the lower bracket, and with every match win, they looked stronger too. By the time they reached the final, everyone truly believed Fnatic would bring home the trophy to EMEA, but it wasn't meant to be. Sentinels beat them 3-0 in the final, creating a record while doing so as well, to become the only team in Valorant to win a championship without dropping a single map so far. A feat worthy of a trophy, but Fnatic were dejected. There were a lot of things that everyone saw Fnatic were just making a mess of, and making tiny mistakes at the wrong times that we kinda hadn't seen them make before. It was an unlucky and a bad day at the office for them. One to forget because of how unbelievably close all 3 maps were. They finished second, but they showed the world what they're capable of. The discipline that they showed under the leadership of Boaster and the mentality he provides to the team is unparalleled. They brushed themselves off and set sights on Valorant's biggest prize, Champions. Playing a couple of mid-season tournaments and kind of losing their form in the challengers between Masters Reykjavik and Champions Berlin, they had a couple of odd place finishes, losing to Liquid and even G2. But little did they know, a bigger disappointment was yet to come. Fnatic luckily made it to Champions thanks to their EMEA circuit points, and they were heading into the competition with some pretty massive teams waiting to demolish everyone. Fnatic started off pretty well in their group, taking it 2-0 and qualifying to the playoffs, beating Cloud9 and Vision Strikers. They were looking pretty good and were ready to face Crew in the quarterfinals of Champions, or so we thought. Fnatic were one of the top teams on Haven in the world and unfortunately lost out to Crew in a really close matchup before absolutely dominating on their pick of Icebox. They got to the third map with momentum on their hands but had to play on a map that was, well, historically not their best. Fnatic have kind of a love-hate relationship with Split, it being a place of both good and not so good memories for them. They got outclassed by the South American giants of the time and bowed out of champions with a 5th to 8th place finish, something that honestly no one expected from them. With the roster they had, the potential they possessed, and the promise they showed, Fnatic were actually minimum top 4 contenders. They should have been fighting for the title but instead got outplayed in the first round of the playoffs by a team that truly showed determination against them. Fnatic, especially Boaster, was really disappointed by this and the fact that they had to end the year with a loss this bad. They thought it'll only get better, but little did they know that 2022 was going to start off even worse for them. Fnatic went into 2022 with just one roster change, replacing Doma with Brave AF for the EMEA Stage 1 challengers. They were a bit shaky but managed to get themselves to qualify for Masters barely by placing third, losing to G2 3-0 to finish there. They made it to Masters, yes, but unfortunately, 2 of their playing 5 players didn't. Brave AF came under heavy scrutiny due to certain remarks he made, which made Fnatic to suspend him right before Masters, and Durka, their star player, got the unfortunate case of COVID right before Masters, making him ineligible to travel, and Riot were also pretty strict about their safety and health conditions for all their players. This forced Fnatic to find last-minute replacements in the form of Hyber and Fearoth, who stood in for Fnatic at one of the biggest Valorant events, and well, things just rolled off the hill for them. Having changed 2 key players just days before a major tournament almost always causes a calamity, no matter which team, and this happened to Fnatic too. Having almost close to no practice or synergy formed between these players, Fnatic went into Masters handicapped and were booted out of the group stages itself by Zeta and NIP. They lost 0-2 and finished 11th to 15th, making it Fnatic's worst ever placement in an international Valorant event. Masters 1 of 2022 in Reykjavik was a dark moment in Fnatic's infant Valorant history, but as Harvey Dent said, the night is darkest before dawn. Fnatic realized their Masters loss was just a series of misfortunate events that plagued their team, and they did not give up. They made 2 more changes to their roster, and that actually gave them a boost greater than ever before. Brave AF, already being suspended, allowed Fnatic to get the Turkish talent Alfaya, and Magnum made way for the French powerhouse Enzo, who gave Fnatic and Valorant one of its most iconic moments seen yet.
Swing, Enzo! You can't be doing this, son. A 1v2 swaps the weaponry around, the players are low. A single bullet on either of them, it might be enough. It could be enough. The horn dropped, positioning gained. And now that a few stuck down to half, he knows where the opposition is. He's sticking it! What an insane play from Enzo! Ice cold!
Come VCT EMEA Stage 2 challengers, Fnatic were the super team amongst many others from EU. They went into the competition with solid prep and blew out their group, being the only team to go 5-0 across both groups. Going into the playoffs, they had absolute monsters like M3C, ex-Master winners, Ascend, ex-Champions winners, Guild Esports, Liquid, and FPX. Literally the top of the world against them, but Fnatic were ready for it all. They swept through the entire upper bracket and also clean swept FPX in the grand final 3-0, who were considered to be one of the best teams in the world at the moment. Fnatic was soaring high, winning challengers, and went into Masters 2 as favorites. Fnatic were already in the upper brackets thanks to their first place finish in challengers, and in the first round they beat FPX for the 3rd time in a row and were looking great. But what they didn't expect was the chaos that was Paper Rex. The APAC team was creating ruckus in their region but couldn't make an international ripple until now. They threw Fnatic out of the water and sent them to the lower brackets where they had to fight for their lives again. They had studied for probably every other exam, but Paper X was the question that came out of syllabus. Fnatic were phased but still fought with all their might until they faced their most familiar foe, FPX, again, this time in the lower bracket semi-final. Fnatic had beaten them 3 times in a row and almost seemed like they knew practically everything that FPX threw at them, and thanks to the experience, they should have actually beaten them. But it looks like this time, in a gap of just a few days, FPX found a crack in their code. They beat Fnatic 2-1, handing them yet again another international disappointment. A 4th place finish in Masters 2, and a lot of questions started arising in Fnatic's direction at this point. Having the roster they did, why aren't Fnatic able to do more on the international stage? Is it Boaster and Mini's time to leave? What do they need to do to get their hands on international silverware? 2 months later, Champions Istanbul was to be held, and Fnatic forgot about the past and tried to put all their focus onto the end of the year event. They qualified with their circuit points, seeding 2nd from EMEA. They reached Istanbul only to have a very shaky start, losing their opening match to 100 Thieves and the pressure just mounting on them. They had to get out of the groups at the very least. They fought their way through by beating Furia and made sure they overturned their 100 Thieves loss by defeating them 2-0 in the decider match. Fnatic scraped themselves out of the group but stood to face an even tougher competition. Except, who weren't really seen as a giant in the competition, actually ended up upsetting Fnatic convincingly. They sent them to the lower brackets, and yet again Fnatic just seemed to be fighting to keep their head above the water. They met Team Liquid, whom they were able to comfortably beat, but as history would have it, it was yet another APAC team that threw Fnatic's dreams and hopes into the mud. DRX yeeted Fnatic out of Champions, beating them in a close 2-1 matchup, resulting them in finishing 5th, 6th place. Yet again, international stage disappointment for Fnatic, and now people really started questioning Fnatic's decision to still stick with Mini and Boaster. They felt that maybe Fnatic needed a change in the coaching and leading staff, but Fnatic knew exactly what Boaster was made of and what his dreams and ambitions are. They never lost faith in him and fueled all their trust into his and Mini's skill, and in the end, it finally did pay off. Whilst Champions was still ongoing, Riot were announcing their 2023 seasons and onwards revamp of competition and the introduction of the VCT Franchise League and Tier 2 of Valorant. While it looked promising, only 10 teams would fill each of the 3 leagues, and soon after, Champions, Fnatic got to work. It was almost practically confirmed that Fnatic would definitely get a slot in EMEA. So while the org was taking care of the business side of things, Boaster and Mini started their focus on the revamp of the roster. Fnatic said goodbye to Enzo, and Leo from Guild, who was considered one of the best initiator players on the planet, donned the infamous black and orange. With just that change itself, Fnatic already looked like a much better team. Fnatic, though, was still not done. They knew that they had to make a change that would not just shake up an entire region, but the whole goddamn world. So they went ahead and bid adieu to Mystic and unveiled to the world the absolutely cracked Masters winner and Champions runner-up, Chronicle. If you looked at this roster, you actually wouldn't believe how insanely crazy it looks on paper. Led by the mind of Boaster in game, and follow that quite literally with 3 of the top 10 players in the world in their respective roles, being Leo, Chronicle and Durka, and the prodigious talent and patience that is Alphaya. This almost seems unfair at first glance because Fnatic pulled out all the stops and made quite literally a team that just cannot bloody lose, at least on paper. They showed a glimpse of their potential in Japan at the Riot Games 1, but that was nothing compared to what we were going to see at VCT Lock in Sao Paolo. Fnatic had about 3 good months to prepare for what was going to be the biggest Valorant event held yet on Earth. 32 teams from multiple corners of the planet, brand new rosters, new comps, new strategies that they would be completely unaware of, and so many more things to consider that you would be in the dark about going into this event. While every team out there had stacked rosters, trying out new things and finding their synergy, Fnatic were already under the pressure from the minute they signed Leon Chronicle to win the whole goddamn thing. It was almost a prerequisite that was slapped onto their foreheads with this ultimate roster. NRG, Loud, Na'Vi, DRX, all these teams too had great experience and rosters, and the pressure to win was also on them. But not as much as Fnatic, who've pulled tooth and nail to get where they did. They had to weave a story like never before seen in the infant history of Valorant. A story that they would be able to tell whilst holding that green and silver trophy in their hands. A story with tears of joy. A story cementing a legacy. And that's exactly what happened. Fnatic's start to the tournament showed us a true glimpse of their power when they beat Sentinels in a matchup that was far too big to be a first round game. Everyone was really hyped because of not just the revamp that Fnatic did, but because Sentinels picked up Sassy and Pancada, two world champions, and the incredibly talented ex-Exet player Zekin. And they still, of course, had 10s. Both teams were literally stacked to the brim, but Fnatic were just too goddamn good. They shimmied through Sentinels and had a bit of a head scratcher against Furia, but they were still able to beat them 2-0. When they reached their group semi-finals, they were to face 100 Thieves, who were NA's last hope and seemed to be really strong. Or so we thought. Fnatic literally schooled 100T on the first map of Fracture, which was the 100 Thieves map pick, by the way, beating them 13-1 with a game plan that honestly shocked a lot of people, as well as completely showed us what Fnatic's true potential is. Humiliating them and giving them a similar haunt to when they were infamously beaten 13-0 by the Guard. Map 2 was fought harder by them, but nothing Fnatic couldn't handle as Durka tore through them piece by piece and were looking like the team to beat. The minute they beat Furia, echoes of excitement of Na'Vi facing them or Loud facing them in the grand final already began to take shape. People were waiting for those mouth-watering ties, and Fnatic did not disappoint. Na'Vi seemed like headless chickens in front of Fnatic as Leo showed up in the most massive way possible, unleashing one of the best performances seen by a player, beating Na'Vi 3-0. Yes, the same Na'Vi that has their squad filled with VCT Masters winners alongside a VCT Champions winner as well. This was something I think no one expected, given that Na'Vi's run so far was amazing at the lock-in. Until this point, Fnatic hadn't even dropped a single map. They outclassed Na'Vi to step into the grand finals unbeaten and gave us a matchup of dreams. Fnatic versus Loud. They had a chance to finally find that elusive international trophy. A chance at redemption for Boaster and Mini. A chance to prove that they are the best Valorant team in the world. The matchup started in dominating Fnatic fashion. Ascent was up first, and it was a map that Loud was actually the best in the world historically. Up until that point, Loud had a 20 win and 1 loss record in their all-time official Ascent matches. That is outrageously good. And that's why this loss in Ascent made them and the crowd a little nervous. Fnatic's retakes were like stuff of dreams, to be honest. Fluid, near perfect coordination, and damn near impossible to stop or counter. Their utility management was one of the best I've ever seen, as they did not hesitate to give away the side to Loud and just outclass them on retakes. On the attack, Durka and Leo were absolutely just tearing through Loud with their incredibly well-planned attacks and showing us the power of lineups. They handed Loud their second ever loss on a near perfect Ascent record and went into the next map with immense momentum. Boaster's brain was seen as a blueprint lying out in this grand final, and Fnatic were making the best use of him. They were able to turn the stadium of almost 8,000 people into a library of 8,000 people with their plays, and they relished in the power of their tactics. Fracture clearly being one of their strongest maps, Fnatic showed again the same pressure to Loud as they did to 100 Thieves and dominated them throughout the game, thanks to another mind-boggling performance by Leo. He went 23-11 on the Fade and showed the world how to play that agent. Their knack of just maintaining pure discipline and following strong fundamentals of Valorant by positioning each other based off of their teammates to trade and crossfire, understanding the importance of holding, just being patient overall and communicating to the best of their abilities rewarded them a second map. The team as a whole was performing at their best level, whilst Leo stole the show and Durka followed closely and kept up with him. At this point, it genuinely seemed like Fnatic were going to wrap up this game on map 3 itself. Loud was a shadow of their former self in both maps that were played, and everyone was watching the shades of orange and black taking over in London and across the world. But then came the map that seemed to turn everything every time against them. Again, a map that Fnatic maybe just want to throw back out of the map pool again. Split. Split is like that toxic ex of Fnatic who just wouldn't let go. They fumbled the ball massively as Loud found their confidence on defense after a very close first half. Loud were feeling it after putting 10 on the board and started pushing Fnatic like the map belonged to them. This not only raised back the mental of Loud, but gave the crowd standing behind them a voice louder than ever. It seemed like the stage was trembling, but only Fnatic were feeling the effects of it, having lost Split. But it was still 2-1. Fnatic just needed one more map, and the next map was their pick of Lotus. But little did they know that Lotus would be a map that Loud completely had under control. Loud's ability to play that double controller comp really was annoying Fnatic, and it was seen. The first half had almost run away with Loud, putting up multiple rounds in a row, but Fnatic managed to tidy up a bit and put up a 5-7 half. They won the pistol in the second half too and equalized to 7-7, but this is where Loud started their counterattack. Even though Aspas had a relatively quiet final, his teammates were showing up, especially Les. He put up a massive performance on Lotus, competing with Leo's Fracture, going 22-11 and carrying his team to the 5th and final map of Icebox in the grand final. Icebox has been one of Fnatic's best maps. They chose and won on this map against 100 Thieves as well and have been really good in the past too. But things didn't go according to plan initially. Loud's double controller meta just kept constantly messing things up for them, as that combo of Harbor and Viper was nasty to deal with. The amount of control that they commanded was amazing. Boaster even mentioned in an interview post the event that Harbor kinda annoyed them a lot because they didn't expect him to be played as much. Icebox begins and the sound of the 8,000 green and black Loud fans behind them was deafening, but only for Fnatic. They dropped the ball on Icebox defense really hard and ended up with a 3-9 first half, staring at their faces, humming the sounds of another second place finish. It became even worse when Fnatic lost the pistol and the eco, and Loud were up by 11-3. The crowd, the stadium, their opponents, and even looking at their screens, everything seemed to be overwhelming for Fnatic. It seemed as if all hope was lost. Aspas looked like he had resurrected himself from the dead on Icebox, being 21-5 at 11-3 up. It seemed impossible. Boaster stared into the pixels on his screen as he dreaded the defeat he had hoped would never come his way again. Fnatic called their only timeout and everyone dialed in. One round at a time. That's all they had to focus on. Forget the score on the top of their screens. One round at a time and they will write history. One round at a time and Fnatic will cement themselves as the best we've ever seen. The greatest players produce their greatest performances when they are most needed. And from that fateful timeout, ladies and gentlemen, we saw the greatest comeback victory we've ever seen in this game so far. Fnatic's attack was beyond anything as Durka stood up for his team at a time where everyone lost their souls. He gave everyone the willpower through his own and his entries and his space creation. The clutches from Durka, Chronicle and Alfire, the lurking prowess of Boaster and the support and trade power of Leo all seemed to be weaving in and coming together. They played patiently and as a team. They started making good on their mistakes and found great opportunities to exploit. Did not overcommit, did not fall out of structure. Round after round, they threw something new into the faces of Loud, and Loud just couldn't adjust. When individual potential meets teamwork, trophies are what usually end up in your hands. Fnatic equalized the score to 11-11, making a statement in the process that they are not ones to give up. They found their groove back and the confidence, and the happiness that they had was shining bright on their faces for the world to see. They did take the lead, making it 12-11, but Loud were able to muster up courage to get the match to overtime in a close final round of regulation. The crowd was cheering for them, but it wasn't the same as before. You could feel it. You could hear the pressure and you could feel that Fnatic had touched a nerve, and this is when Boaster knew it was time to attack. On their defense, Fnatic brought out the operator onto Durka's hands, and Loud's mistake of not expecting it ended the match for me.
But the rest of Loud make sure that they can creep and crawl and right into the line of sight. Durka will not let that go unpunished. Big flash play through, and it's a collateral. Durka runs Icebox.
This one moment of trying to gain control and information on the B site gave Durka the one and only chance to put Fnatic's hands onto that trophy. On the attacking round, Fnatic took their time, played with Loud's mind, and made them commit mistakes. Loud's hesitation and pressure of just wanting to find a trade or a kill to easy up things for themselves opened the B side to the full force of Fnatic, and 10 minutes after that,
and the fight is over. 14-12, denying the reverse sweep.
What insane mental resilience from this squad to be able to battle back, deny the trophy in front of the home crowd.
we saw Boaster's dreams finally coming true. We saw Fnatic's faith in him and Mini fruition. We witnessed a game that we'd never seen before, and we witnessed a team lifting a trophy who deserved it after all their hard work. We saw Fnatic creating yet another story in esports that we will relive for years to come. A story that shows why we love Valorant. A story of triumph. A story of redemption. A story of joy. A story that is truly Fnatic.